The broadcast is now starting.
Us for our webinar today for School Executive Standard 4, Human Resource Leadership. We will begin the webinar in approximately 4 minutes. Good afternoon, and welcome to the School Executive Standard 4, Human Resource Leadership webinar. My name is Kimberly Simmons, and thank you for joining us, and I hope that we have some interesting information to share with you today and hopefully get some of your responses as well. So if you can hear the sound of my voice, your settings should be okay for today's session. If you would please signify your audio is working by raising your hand on the dashboard beside your name. Great. Okay. So again, my name is Dr. Kimberly Simmons, and I am the NCEES coordinator for the state of North Carolina. I'm joined today by Dr. Mandy Taylor, professional development coordinator for Educator Support Services. Heather Stewart may be on the line, and she is also a professional development coordinator from Educator Support Services. And we also have Delia Payne, another colleague, also from Educator Support Services. So these ladies will be monitoring the questions bar, and we hope that if you do have questions that you let us know, and we will try to respond to those. Either if they're personalized, we will respond independently to you, or if it's a question that may be applicable to everyone in the webinar, hopefully these ladies will share it with me and we'll have a little bit of discussion around anything that you need more clarification. Our webinar norms for today, in order to get the most out of today's webinar, we ask that everyone minimize your outside distractions, be attentive and participate. Notify the presenter if you are having technical difficulties by raising your hand, and please use the questions bar on your dashboard to ask questions. This webinar has 3 prerequisites for today. School Executive Standard 4, Human Resource Leadership recorded webinar, including the presentation slides. And we also ask that you have reviewed the North Carolina School Executive Questions resource used to evaluate principals and assistant principals. You will see some familiar slides from the recorded webinar presentation, and much of our discussion today will stem from the 3rd resource listed here, the North Carolina School Executive Questions. To the left, you see a screenshot of the questions for North Carolina School Executive Standards resource. Human resource leadership questions are located in the red box and magnified to the right for us to see. This resource was created as a response to superintendents. They were familiar with the resource created for principals to use when coaching teachers, and they wanted one to address the standards for principal evaluation as well. This resource also helps us as administrators better understand the desired outcomes for each standard. We will examine the questions throughout the presentation today for clarity with each element. Participants will gain a better understanding of the North Carolina School Executive Standards. And participants today for our webinar outcomes will examine the 3 elements that reflect human resource leadership, become familiar with questions for school executive standards. We'll also explore characteristics of the millennial teacher, gain knowledge for retaining the irreplaceable teachers in your school, receive clarification regarding NCEES misconceptions, and also provide additional artifacts for human resource leadership. So here we have the definition of Standard 4, Human Resource Leadership. This definition and the rubric can be found on page 31 of the Principal and Assistant Principal Manual. As I read the definition, notice the words that are underlined and also the words that are in red font. School executives will ensure that the school is a professional learning community. School executives will ensure that processes and systems are in place that result in the recruitment, induction, support, evaluation, development, and retention of high-performing staff. The school executive must engage and empower accomplished teachers in a distributive leadership manner, including support of teachers in day-to-day decisions such as discipline, communication with parents, and protecting teachers from duties that interfere with teaching, and must practice fair and consistent evaluation of teachers. The school executive must engage teachers and other professional staff in conversations to plan their career paths and support district succession planning. So the HR definition focuses on 3 areas: the school, the staff, and the teachers. And we will see this more clearly as we examine the 3 elements. So here we have element 4A, professional development and learning communities, and this is where we have a school focus. The principal or assistant principal ensures that the school is a professional learning community. Element 4B, recruiting, hiring, placing, and mentoring of staff. The principal and assistant principal establishes processes and systems in order to ensure a high-quality, high-performing staff. And element 4C, teacher and staff evaluation. The principal, assistant principal evaluates teachers and other staff in a fair and equitable manner with the focus on improving performance and thus student achievement. So, we would like to hear from you. Which of the elements between element 4A, 4B, and 4C do you find most difficult for you as a human resource leader in your school? And briefly explain why. And I included one here just as an example. I put 4C. It is difficult giving critical feedback to help teachers grow, and because they are so sensitive to receiving critical feedback. So if you could please respond to the poll by going to pollev.com/NC 2015 or text NC 2015 to the number 37607 once to join, and then to text your message. Once you join, you'll then receive a reply which tells you that you can submit your text. So ladies, while we're waiting on some of the responses to come in, do we have any questions in the question bar or any need for clarification?
Not at this time.
Okay. So again, which of the elements, element 4A, professional development, learning communities, or element 4B, recruiting, hiring, placing, and mentoring of staff, or element 4C, teacher and staff evaluation, is most difficult for you as an HR leader in your school? Briefly explain why.
Kim, if you are sharing with us, we can't hear you.
Okay, thank you, Mandy.
You may need to just recap the feedback, your thoughts about the poll everywhere results that were shared.
Okay, thank you so much. So the poll, yes. All of the different responses that we received definitely relate back to the human resource leadership standard. And I think you guys have seen this. I'll let them play out again. I think a couple of comments certainly identified that it is difficult to find highly qualified teachers, especially in rural areas. And I made the comment that especially in the areas of math and science, we have a difficult time. So absolutely, thank you for your responses. Thank you so much. So okay, we'll go on to the next slide. Here we have a screenshot taken directly from the prerequisite presentation where you have already examined the indicators. Notice the red arrow. We are looking at the school context for this element. You see the natural progression of each indicator. Notice the highlighted words: understands, provides, facilitates, and ensures. So digging deeper into this standard, we're going to examine the questions provided for deeper understanding. For element A, professional development and learning communities, the first question states, tell me about your PLCs and the types of data they use to drive their meetings. This statement clearly emphasizes the need for PLCs to be using data during their meetings. Data examples may include student performance data, formative data, benchmarks, discipline referrals, attendance, school improvement goals, just to name a few. The point here being that PLCs should be using data with clear outcomes for their meetings. The next question, what are some outcomes you experienced this year by attending PD with your staff? Ask yourself, are you attending PD with your staff so you understand the importance of their attendance? Your attendance communicates to your staff that what they are learning is important. And remember, what is important to the principal is important to the teachers. They watch and follow your lead. Question 3, what are some creative ways you have ensured professional development for your teachers aside from traditional workshops and trainings? Responses here may include book studies, online webinars, possibly facilitated as a group, or self-paced online PD. As a principal, I always had a staff retreat where we had some outside influence, but primarily our learning stemmed from within our own staff. With budget cuts to our professional development budgets, getting creative with staff learning will become more and more important, not to mention being more relevant to your staff needs. Do we have any questions or comments at this time, ladies? Anything to share?
No, we do not.
Okay, great. So moving along, here we have element 4B. Our context arrow is pointing to staff, recruiting, hiring, placing, and mentoring. I will give you a minute to review this screenshot with the markings. This element addresses your leadership continuously building teacher capacity within your school. So now digging deeper. Our questions for 4B ask, what data do you use to determine the best placement of teachers? And how do you support new teachers in your building? Most new teachers are millennials, and we know that they are more mobile and willing to leave their positions more than ever before. So I thought it might be a good idea for us to take a look at our millennials and what we need to be thinking about as leaders to keep our millennial teachers. So how do I keep millennials in my school? So after some research, I have come up with a few things that we can do to entice our millennial teachers, our new teachers. And I'll begin with establish shared vision and goals. Millennials want to work in a setting with a clear shared vision, including specific, measurable goals. Most importantly, they want to be a part of creating and owning that vision. Next, provide leadership opportunities. Millennials expect to be involved and to assume responsibility. They do not automatically defer to more senior teachers. Lack of leadership opportunity has been shown to weaken their allegiance and commitment to your school. Create a positive school culture. A positive school culture is important for everyone, but particularly for millennials. They are the most diverse generation. They are comfortable with diversity. So celebrating generational diversity and use cross-generational teams to work on curriculum and instruction is very beneficial. Be clear that seniority isn't the most important factor in making decisions. Provide clear, candid feedback. Millennials, unlike other generational groups, expect in-depth feedback because they want to contribute to the success of your school. They expect accountability and value honest, open, and personalized feedback and support. Think about the post-observation conference here and how during the post-observation conference, you're wanting to give that feedback. A lot of times, our Gen Xers or our baby boomers or our other generations, we have to be very careful because, like I mentioned before, when we were giving feedback on which element that we had more difficulty with, a lot of times our teachers are sensitive to receiving feedback. Here we have found in doing research and talking to millennials, they want that feedback, whether it be critical or not. They want to know what they're doing right, but they also want specific feedback on what they need to change to be better. Embrace technology. Millennials have had access and used technology their entire lives. They expect the same access at school for both teachers and students. They recognize the value of technology for improving their teaching and student learning, and they expect current state-of-the-art technology, and they want it to be available for them to use. And of course, with our budgets, this varies between schools, but this is what is enticing to millennials, is they want technology. Next, use data effectively and often. Because millennials are comfortable with accountability and receiving that feedback I mentioned earlier, they enjoy the use of data. This also sets them apart from other generations of employees, including many school leaders. They want access to user-friendly data that can be used to improve their work. And last, encourage work-life balance. Millennials are clear that they will have a balance between their personal and professional lives. They believe that a healthy balance between work and one's personal life makes both better and makes them a better, more committed employee. And here we have just a few statements about that. Work-life balance. Millennials are clear that they will have a balance between their personal and professional lives. Respect their choice and use it as a model for your own work-life balance. Millennials may ignore unrealistic deadlines that infringe on their personal life, and understand that balance is important for millennials, and the lack of balance may also loosen their commitment to their job and your school. So I want to go back to this second bullet here that says millennials may ignore unrealistic deadlines that infringe on their personal life. And I think about myself as a new teacher. If a leader in my school asked me to do something, if I was planning on going and working out that afternoon after school, I would forfeit going to my plans, my previous plans, and make sure that I met the request of my leader. And you may find from millennials that they will not do this. If that's important to them and they have plans to go work out, if we have unrealistic deadlines or last minute things we want them to do, they are going to prioritize their work-life balance. So to wrap that up about millennials, it's really all about relationships and communication and a little bit of tolerance from everyone. And I love this visual here. The Gen Xers, we see they're sharing the ice cream sundae and attentive with each other. And here we have millennials sitting down and sharing music and being very isolated while sharing their music. But I think this is a great visual to wrap up the change from Gen X to millennials. So now we've looked at our millennials as a group, so let's focus on those teachers in your building that we consider the irreplaceables. These teachers, the teachers that when they leave, we are not going to be able to replace them. That's why they're called irreplaceables. They have this historical knowledge of the school's culture. They are instructional rock stars, and they arrive each day with their best foot forward. They are irreplaceable. These teachers could be millennials, Gen Xers, or baby boomers. So I want each of you to think about those irreplaceables in your school right now. And you may just have a couple, or if you're fortunate, you may have half a dozen. If you're really, really fortunate, you may have a dozen, but they are rare. So as we have discussions of teacher turnover, it usually focuses on how many teachers leave school each year without regard for their performance in the classroom. This oversimplification masks the real teacher retention crisis that we have. Not only a failure to retain enough teachers, but a failure to retain the right teachers, the irreplaceable teachers. So I have a link here to a paper which examines the real retention crisis through experiences of a group that we have called irreplaceables. Again, teachers who are successful and that it's nearly impossible to replace. Teachers of this caliber provide more engaging learning experiences for students, and help them achieve 5 to 6 more months of learning each year than students of low-performing teachers. So academic results that can be life-changing. So again, this TNTP published a report called The Irreplaceables, and the report found these 3 things that I have bulleted. Principals make far too little effort to retain irreplaceables or remove low-performing teachers. And I understand why. As a practicing principal, I can definitely relate to each of these 3 bullets. When we are in need of teachers in our schools, it's, the idea of removing low-performing teachers, what we do instead is we try to grow those low-performing teachers to be better teachers. The second bullet, poor school cultures and working conditions drive away great teachers. And last, policies give principals and district leaders few incentives to change their ways. So I strongly, strongly suggest that you take a look at this irreplaceable article. There is a like a summary, an executive summary that you can read pretty quickly, and it gives you great information. But just a little bit more about the irreplaceable teacher. Less than 30% of irreplaceables plan to leave for personal reasons beyond the school's control. And principals' actions have a significant impact on the decisions of the other 70%. At schools that retain higher percentages of irreplaceables, principals created cultures of respect and trust, but were also less likely to tolerate ineffective teachers. Irreplaceables want feedback, and they want to know that they are valued for their contribution. They want you to ask them to stay. So of all the teachers that are leaving your school, 30%, that could be from a family relocating, retirement, or just deciding to stay at home. But this preventable 70%, that's just changing schools, going to another LEA, going to a school or an area that offers a different teaching climate. Questions? Do we have any questions, Dr. Taylor?
No, we're still
Comments?
looking good.
Okay, good. So moving on to element 4C, teacher and staff evaluations. The principal or assistant principal evaluates teachers and other staff in a fair and equitable manner with the focus on improving performance and thus student achievement. So let's begin with the development indicator that states, adheres to legal requirements for teachers and staff evaluation. As a developing leader, it is crucial that the evaluation process for teachers and staff is followed as defined in the teacher evaluation manual. So I thought I would include this one-pager, and we have a link that we'll provide for you, this one-page graphic that outlines the evaluation process for teachers. And we'll get this linked for you in the chat bar. So this is a tool that you can use to make sure that you are following the evaluation process as defined by state board policy. So we also have some misconceptions across the state, and so I have identified 4 or 5, I can't remember, of these misconceptions for our webinar today. Here we have the number of years a teacher has worked should be considered when completing the rubric, and this is false. And when I say completing the rubric, what I mean is when you are marking those indicators, should I take into consideration that I'm observing a 20-year teacher or a 5-year teacher? And the answer is false. An evaluation is an annual, year-long process. The number of years a teacher has worked should not influence whether or not a descriptor is marked on the rubric. The descriptors should be marked only for teacher behaviors noted during the current evaluation cycle, which is an annual cycle. Another misconception, teachers in their first year can't get a rating higher than proficient. And these little rules get created across different LEAs, but really to adhere to the state board policy, there are no rules like that. Teachers in their first year can get a rating higher than proficient. They can get any rating. Another misconception, if I don't see it in the classroom, I don't mark it on the rubric, which is false. Mark what you see and mark what you know. You may even mark descriptors after conversing with the teacher during the post-observation conference. Conferences are a great time to gather data to inform your decision to mark descriptors not evident during the observation event. Next, teachers are rated during observations. Teachers are rated only on the summative evaluation at the end of the school year. After an observation, teachers become focused on the descriptors that are marked within each of the rating categories. It is so important for us to remove the discussion around ratings during our post-observation conversations and concentrate on the feedback for improvement based on each of the indicators that we've marked. So what I've been sharing across the state is when our teachers when they identify after an observation, if they consider themselves proficient because you only marked indicators within the proficient category, we need to change those conversations to drill down to the information that's really defined with the indicator and have that growth conversation and leave ratings off the table until the end of the year when you're completing the summative evaluation. So moving on to element 4C. No, not moving on, but going back to element 4C rubric. Under proficient, we have two category indicators. Creates processes to provide formal feedback to teachers concerning the effectiveness of their classroom instruction and ways to improve their instructional practice, and implements district and state evaluation policies in a fair and equitable manner. The accomplished indicator build on the previous, and the distinguished category suggests that the principals use the data collected from the evaluation to provide PD and other opportunities for the school. So if we go back to our questions resource for 4C, what best practices do you use to ensure accurate and reliable evaluations? And what artifacts, in addition to the observation data, do you use to evaluate teachers? Some answers may be attendance data, PLC notes, communication logs, walkthrough data. Additional data will be determined by the practices that you value in your school. What we do know is that feedback is crucial. Struggling teachers need honest feedback, and our irreplaceables want honest feedback. So here is a list of artifacts that are provided in the manual. Additional artifacts may include examples of formative data, new teacher meeting agendas or minutes, PD surveys, observation schedule for the year, resources provided to teachers as a result of an observation, student growth data, pictures of data walls, video, recruitment data, interview protocol or interview questions, websites, or teacher demographics based on your particular criteria. So I'll give you a minute just to read over some of these listed artifacts. So that is all I have for today's webinar. Here you see a screenshot of our NCEES Wiki, where information is available to all. Membership is not required. If you're prompted to join, simply dismiss that pop-up. But you may access this webinar and other materials related to the North Carolina Educator Evaluation System by visiting the NCEES Wiki, and the link is at the top of the page. We hope that you will bookmark this wiki and visit the site frequently to get all the latest updates. And again, this is a public wiki, so you do not have to request membership to access the wiki. But if you notice over on the left side where it says archived webinars, 2017-18 webinars, that is where today's recorded webinar will be, along with the presentation and any other additional resources that we've discussed. But that is where you'll be able to find it. So before we close out today, do we have any other additional questions or comments? And while we're waiting on those, I will remind you that on Tuesday, April 10th, there will be a webinar titled Teacher-Led Conferences, and the registration link is included. And on Tuesday, May 1st, we will take a look at the other school executive Standard 6, External Development Leadership, and Standard 7, Micropolitical Leadership.
Kim, we do have a question.
Great.
Is there any research on how well exit interviews are used to increase teacher retention?
I have not seen any research about exit interviews, but I think that is a great question, and I do see the value. I think that it would be very valuable for our, not just leadership in the school, but our leadership at our LEAs, our HR directors, to hear the reasons why we have teachers that are leaving our buildings, leaving our LEAs, or leaving the profession altogether. But no, I have not seen any specific research around exit interviews.
And I'll pass this comment along as well. Jarrett said, thank you for sharing the 4 truths. I always use the rubric as an opportunity to grow my staff and create opportunities for them to lead staff professional development. So thank you.
Yes, and I want to say, I know as a leader myself, as a principal, it's not easy to relinquish that control or to ask teachers to do something else, like lead professional development. That's not a comfortable place for us, but we really do need to do this to build our capacity. And we're kind of being forced in this direction because of budgets, but I think that there's some great things that are surfacing because of this practice. So thank you for the comment. And, you know, if you leave this webinar just with a couple of things, just start making those slight changes. And next year, when you are looking at your PDP plan and you're having those conversations, if you're an assistant principal with your principal, and if you're a principal with your superintendent or whoever conducts your evaluation, be thinking about these very specific elements that you can identify in your PDP, and then what you can do moving forward. That type of change and that type of growth can be very exciting for a principal, just making slight changes. I sometimes question when we as leaders try to make these big changes. You know, we're trying to be innovative. We're trying to, you know, we're on the fast track to improvement for our teachers and for our students and to improve the climate. But making just those small, slight changes, being aware of millennials and their needs, being aware of those irreplaceables in our building, making sure that they know how valued they are, how important their contribution is. So, and as you leave this webinar today, this week or next week, you know, think about that irreplaceable teacher in your building. Make sure they know that you want them back next year, and that you want their contribution to your school.
And Kim, we have another question.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on student surveys as it relates to Standard 4?
I think student surveys are great tools for collecting information, but I do not, I'm not a supporter of the student surveys being used to inform an evaluation. You know, we have very specific indicators which I think would address the same information that we are soliciting from our students. While it informs us, I don't think that it should be directly related to the evaluation. And I don't know if I'm politically correct for even sharing that, but that's my feeling. I love getting student survey data. I love hearing what the students are feeling and what the students want to share. And I think that the surveys that I've seen are very good at for example, what we're all afraid of is that a student gets mad at a teacher, and so they communicate this frustration, or they communicate how disgruntled they are, in their responses. But a good student survey eliminates that type of bias, and really specifically focuses on instructional strategies and the climate of the classroom. So I think it's good data to have to inform what you know about the teacher, but to directly inform the evaluation, I'm not so much proponent.
Right. Well, and thank you for sharing that.
Any other questions?
Not at this time. I think they've all been submitted and answered.
Great. So we'll just wait on the line for a couple of minutes in case somebody thinks of something. Please never, ever hesitate to reach out to me at kimberly.simmons@dpi.nc.gov if you have a specific question about conducting evaluations in your school, or teacher retainment, or if you just want to, whatever support I can provide, please just reach out and let me know, and I'll be happy to do so. If you've not heard back from me within 24 hours, try again, because I do try to have a 24-hour response rate, and I could have overlooked your email, or it could go to spam. You just never know. But please reach out if I can support you.